Welcome to the Empowered Women Life Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Karen Bashford. This podcast is for every woman who has ever felt limited by her past, silenced by trauma, or held back by society's expectations. Each week, we will share powerful stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you become the leader of your own life. We've reached yet more listeners, which is wonderful news. However, for this channel to work, we need more subscribers. So wherever you're listening or watching, can you hit that subscribe button? Thank you. Today I am going to talk about courage. And courage isn't always what you imagine it to be. It can be really loud, it can be very obvious, but courage is also something that can be very quiet and that can actually surprise you. And I say this because of my own personal experiences. Courage is a willingness to be curious about what is possible. It's choosing to go inwards and question your old beliefs, patterns, habits, behaviors. It's also to take responsibility for your own actions and choices. It's taking a step forward, even though you're fearful, even though you're uncertain, and even though you know that in taking that action, it could disrupt your life. Now, I've chosen to talk about this today, partly because I am taking steps that a year ago I wouldn't have even considered. 6 months ago, I started to reflect on what I wanted for an empowered woman. And I realize my journey has been very much about empowering myself and recognizing that what I've learned along the way will help other women. Now, I've known that for a long time. However, there were niggly self-doubts. There were moments when I really questioned, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why did I create Sloth or Beaver? Why did I allow myself to step back and just go through my nervous breakdown? I could have gone to the doctors and got some counselling or some kind of help. We obviously have that facility, although admittedly we can wait a long time for that help. But it was an option. But I chose not to take that option. And for me, that is what courage is all about. It's making that choice that perhaps goes against what is intuitively right or logically right even. And logically, it would have been sensible to get help. Maybe I didn't have the courage to ask for help. And maybe it would have made a difference. But the courage I displayed to myself was to go inwards, to question everything that had happened in my life and why they had influenced me so much in the decisions I made, in the choices that I, at times, if I'd thought about it, probably wouldn't have made, but they felt right. And it takes courage to listen to yourself when you're so used to listening to everyone else. Today is a prime example. I chose to stand and do this podcast rather than sit as normal at my desk. I have a rising desk. It was something I treated myself to over a year ago now, simply as a means of enabling me to still work, but at least release some of the back pain I had from sitting still. Now, as a woman, I'm sure many of you hold back pain in your shoulders, across your shoulders, across your hips. They're all created due to the fact we hold ourselves so tight, so stressed out with everything we have to do, that we forget we have to relax. And courage is very much about taking the actions that say yes to you and no to others. Courage is about setting healthy boundaries. If you've always been told that you have to do things for others, or that's what you've decided you have to do to be liked, to be approved of, to be accepted, to belong to a family group, or to belong at school, or even to belong at work, you will be holding a lot of stress in your back. And that's what I found. I was holding so much that sitting for any length of time gave me a backache. Even standing can give me a backache, but at least with standing, I can move. Now, you might have noticed that I tend to trust where my conversations with you go. I tend not to question them. And I do that because I have the courage to accept that whatever comes out of my mouth is going to be whatever somebody needs to hear. And I wish sometimes I'd had that ability to do that for myself rather than listening to everyone else. As I was growing up and as a mature adult, I was still listening to the stories that I'd been told by my family, or the stories I'd created because of what I'd been through with my family. Courage is the ability to ask for help. I didn't ask for help. I never, ever asked for help. I found it very hard to actually ask for help. How easy do you find it to actually ask for help? For that matter, how easy do you find it to say yes when help is offered? Or do you come up with some kind of excuse as to why you're fine, you can't accept that help. And that's what we do to ourselves. We say we're fine when actually we're not. We very rarely express what's important to us. Maybe because we're so used to not doing so. But times are changing, and we know that. And expressing what you want, expressing how you feel, and even sharing your insights, such as I do on these podcasts, are now more acceptable. We have moved along. We have finally accepted that a woman can be capable, not just of running the household or looking after the children, but of doing a really good job at running a business, supporting a business, being a team leader. After all, she has all these skills that come from looking after a family or being involved in a family. And we should let women utilise those skills far more than we have done previously. I've often spoken with clients who have said to me, my family had this problem. And I can think of one who was left as a child with her aunt and uncle, or another one that had been left with her grandparents and very rarely saw her parents and very rarely actually spoke to her parents. And even though her grandparents or her aunt and uncle demonstrated love fully to them and showed them just how much they were loved, and a lot of these women actually state that they love their grandparents or they loved their aunt and uncle because they felt secure in themselves. However, that security came from the grandparents or the aunt and uncle, not necessarily from the parents. And it's that rejection that as children we place on how our parents are around us or not around us, as the case may be, that cause us to doubt ourselves. And even if you do doubt yourself, you can be courageous enough to choose yourself. What would choosing yourself look like? How would it feel? What would you be doing instead if you chose yourself? Quite often we say yes rather than no, because we forget we can choose ourselves, or we don't know how to choose ourselves. And I'm sure many of you watching this will probably know what that's like. And maybe, like me, you've moved on and chosen yourself. In choosing yourself, you can have those awkward conversations, those conversations that you don't normally want to deal with. Those conversations that ask somebody, why did you do this? Or why did you do that? Or that's unacceptable and I'm not prepared to put up with it. That's boundaries coming into place, but it's also those awkward questions. Talking about money with a partner can feel awkward and can cause conflict. talking about a behaviour with a partner, whether it's an intimate partner or it's a family member, it's even a friend that you're really close with, or even just a colleague, that they do things that really irritate you. And normally you'd bite your tongue and not bother to say anything. Saying something is courageous. That takes courage if you don't like conflict, if you don't like expressing what's important to you because you've been shut down previously. The sad thing about letting somebody else shut you down is you actually impact you, not them, you. So just think about times when you've wanted to say something and you've not said it. How's it felt? Have you stewed on what you wanted to say for a number of days? Have you lost sleep over rethinking the conversation you could have had? Have you had to deal with a situation that basically, if you'd expressed what you wanted to say and said, "Excuse me, I don't agree with this," would it have been a different outcome? Would you have not had to deal with so many negative situations if you'd had the courage to say, "I don't agree with this. I'm not doing that." Or, "I don't have the time." Courage is very much about letting relationships that don't serve you change. I know we all struggle to end a relationship. It's hard. We're familiar. We've got used to things. We don't want to rock the boat, even though we know we need to. And yet, it takes courage to turn around and say, "This isn't working." I've had clients who have said, "I would love to change my relationships. I'm sick and tired of hearing people complaining about me, family members telling me that I'll never match my brother or my sister, or that I won't be capable of doing something, or I'll do it wrong." And that will eat away at you until you reach a turning point where you go, "No more." And you're willing to question why you continue to accept that relationship, why you continue to tolerate how the person behaves, or even how they make you feel. And one thing I've noticed with the women I work with and the men I work with is how often, when they give themselves permission to turn around and say something, it changes how they feel within themselves. It's almost as if that taunt cord between them and the person is released. And they say that their shoulders feel lighter, they feel lighter. And at times I've actually seen their faces relax. Telling somebody that you want to end a relationship or that you're not happy in a relationship takes courage. So just think for a moment, what does courage mean to you? Do you think that you have to be courageous to be able to say something that's outside your normal vocabulary or presentation or who you are presenting to the world? Is that what courage means to you? Does courage mean to you that you can go and give yourself time that you need to relax, to do something that you need to do rather than following around after everyone else, sorting them out, or always running around planning ahead because it's expected of you? What does courage mean to you? I suppose for me, courage was taking the time for myself to ask myself the many questions I needed to ask about my family, who I was, what I wanted in life, where I was going, even where I'd been and why I hadn't dealt with it before. But courage doesn't have to take a lot of time. It can be a simple, I'm giving myself a moment to think about this. Or my body doesn't feel comfortable, like, as I said before, sitting in a chair all the time, when in fact I knew my back would benefit from standing up and moving around. And even just standing here recording this, I can feel a difference in my body. Not as relaxed as it could be, simply due to the fact I've been sitting for quite a few hours. But it takes courage to listen to what your body is actually telling you, to recognize that you are just as important as anyone else in your life, that you matter. So basically, courage is about being responsible for yourself and not blaming others. I think for many of us, we can blame others. We can actually wait for somebody to rescue us. And that's not because there is somebody to rescue us, but simply because we are so used to not making our own choices, in the sense of we are important, that we often just wait for somebody to rescue us. And I suppose in some ways that was what I was doing prior to my breakdown. But now I recognise nobody is going to rescue me. I have to rescue myself. I have to take responsibility for my choices, for my decisions, for what I actually want to do in my life and how I'm going to achieve it. It's scary. And funny enough, at times, knowing that I have been courageous and chosen myself, sometimes it can feel really awkward, I would say. Even now, 3 years on from my breakdown, it can feel awkward actually choosing myself. I can try and talk myself out of doing something, But then I also recognize that sometimes I'm talking myself out of something because I feel comfortable where I am, and stepping outside that comfort is scary, doesn't feel right. It's almost like, can I do this? Should I do this? But actually, unless there is this deep inner knowing, it's better to say yes rather than no. So tell me, or tell yourself even, what is stopping you from moving beyond where you are? Giving yourself time to choose differently, to actually pause, review, reflect, and then choose. And you don't have to know the full outcome. That was something I learned going through the breakdown, was I didn't have to know the answer. I didn't have to know the next step. I could just choose to accept and then go forward with one step at a time, one day at a time. Even originally, as I first went into the breakdown, 1 minute at a time. I never knew what was coming next for the first 3 months. I often talk about my breakdown because it was the catalyst of my change, of my transformation, of me looking at myself and saying, well, nobody's going to rescue me. What do I need to do for myself? And when I started to come out of the tearful stage and really look at my life properly, I found that it was easier to just accept that I had to sit with questions. I couldn't force something. That sometimes I'd learn something about myself in having sat with a question that I didn't necessarily like, that I wasn't proud of, that if I'd been somebody else talking to me, I'd have probably gone, why the hell did you do that? And even if it wasn't somebody else talking to me, maybe it would have been me saying to myself, why did you do that? And facing the answer, which sometimes was not very pleasant. Sometimes it was like, oh, okay, now I realize and understand why I made that decision, why I had peaks and troughs in my finances, why I was actually made homeless, why I lost my home originally, why I had 2 abusive relationships. And a lot of it came back to the fact that I didn't listen to myself. And if you're not used to listening to yourself, it can feel scary, awkward, uncomfortable, can leave you uncertain. After all, if you're not used to relying on yourself, why would you suddenly want to do so? And I shared in a masterclass I run last week, we do not necessarily know the reason why something happens. However, that something is going to happen for a reason. And sometimes it takes time to realize that it was the best choice for you if you trust yourself. Sometimes you look at something and think, well, that wasn't perhaps the best decision at the time, but it's worked out better for me now. And instead of trying to take yourself back to something you know, you allow yourself to move forward, to realize that even though you're uncomfortable, you don't know what the results are going to be, it's better to just go with the flow rather than resist or trying to stop. Just as it's not a good idea to keep pushing forward if something doesn't feel right. And I'm sure I have felt it, and I know clients have felt this feeling of pushing and finding the more you push, the more uncomfortable you feel. That uncomfortable feeling is often a warning for you to slow down, to actually pause and just review and reflect, to question. And when you do that, you realize, actually, maybe it's not a good idea to keep pushing. Maybe I need to stop. And underneath all that, there is a reason why you shouldn't be pushing. Or it would be better not to push. Or why sometimes we suddenly get this urge to do something and it doesn't make any sense, but you just know you have to do it. That's courage internally. It's allowing yourself to trust yourself to make the right decisions. So I'm going to end with a question. Awareness is all important, as we well know. However, how aware are you of your resistance to change? And are you willing to take courage in your hands and be responsible for doing and being who you truly are supposed to be, not who you think you need to be?